Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Hope you had a great weekend. So bright and early, well, to the extent that 11 a.m. can be bright and early, but you know what I mean. My guest this morning is Engineer Olalere Odusote. He is the Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources in Lagos State. Engineer Odusote, thank you very much for coming on. Good morning.
Well, good morning and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Now, why Engineer Odusote is our man is that we've been hearing for quite a while something about a Lagos State policy, electricity policy. And, you know, we've been hearing about it, they've been working on it, they've been speaking with stakeholders, consulting with all sectors, private sector and all of that. And finally, on Wednesday, His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, will be actually launching this electricity policy. But we have with us the Commissioner, and we shall do our best to, you know, in any case, it's not a secret because you've been on other media sort of trying to get us to understand, because it's people could get the wrong impression. For instance, I've heard people think of Lagos State is going to be generating its own electricity. That is not accurate.
That is not accurate. Perhaps I should take you down memory lane to bring everybody up to date with what Lagos State has been doing in the electricity sector.
Okay.
And it might help us understand how we arrived at the point we are today.
How far back do you want to go? You're going to go back to as far as Engr.
Energy supply in Nigeria and especially Lagos. When they hit a rock in their discussions with the federal government, Lagos State stepped in to bridge the gap. And the intention of Lagos State in stepping in was to ensure that we could get a dedicated amount of electricity from the Engr power station to Lagos that will be dedicated to Lagos. Unfortunately, even with all the best efforts of Lagos, it didn't work out, meaning we paid for it as Lagos State, but the energy was never supplied to Lagos because at that time, NEPA or PHCN said it was not possible. Well, we know it's possible, but we know it just didn't work. Now, Lagos was not in the driver's seat. Lagos was dependent on the federal government for what would happen in power supply in Lagos. Since then, we've done a few other things. We've gone ahead and contracted with 5 separate IPPs to supply power to Lagos facilities. That has worked very well. In addition to that, we've gone ahead to start to intervene in the distribution network. We've supplied over 1,000 transformers around Lagos as Lagos State government. A lot of those transformers have contributed to improving power supply in Lagos. A lot of them are still lying idle because they cannot be connected for one reason or another. However, Lagos State has spent the money to do that. We've also looked at the power sector scape to see how the regulation has been going on and to try and understand how we can participate in it beyond simply investing in infrastructure that belongs to a private company. Our job as a government is really just to regulate and create an enabling environment. And that's what we're trying to do here, to say we've tried it, we've worked with the federal government, we've worked with the private sector, stakeholders in the sector, and now we want to step in and actually start to regulate the sector in Lagos State. There are lots of things that a lot of people already know, and I've said this many times before. The state government, or the state as a whole, receives about 800 to 900 megawatts from the grid. That translates to about 21 watts per person. Lagos is Nigeria's industrial center. That doesn't seem adequate. If you compare Lagos to, for example, South Africa, the whole country now, not just industrial area, they receive about 440 watts per person. So in Lagos, as the industrial center, it should actually be a high concentration so that we can continue to enjoy the economic success that we have been enjoying. Now, if we say 900 megawatts is what we get in Lagos, that's actually not accurate. In addition to the 900 megawatts, our estimate is that there's an additional 4,500 megawatts that's been generated by people. That's significantly higher than what the grid supplies, and it's also very expensive.
Okay.
One of my
so sorry, when you say being generated by the people, are you talking by yours and my generating set? I pass my neighbor, or a bigger one if I can afford it. Is it an aggregate of all of that you refer to as supply?
It's an aggregate of all of the generation that's not supplied by the grid. Whether it's your big generator in your industry, whether it's your generator that you have in your in the telecom sectors, whether it's the better pass my neighbors that you have in the in the neighborhoods, whether it's your big generator in your house, as one of the big men, it's pretty much an aggregate. It also includes the solar home systems and also the few mini grids that we have established in Lagos with using solar in some of the peri-urban and some of the rural areas. So if we aggregate all of them, in our estimate, it comes to about 4,500 megawatts, which is 5 times more than what the grid supplies today. So the grid supply is really a minor, if you will, portion of the energy that we consume in Lagos, which should not be, because the energy, the off-grid energy that we're calculating now is significantly more expensive. And so what we want to do is to optimize that space, right? And then at some point, interlink with the grid to ensure that people are able to get the energy that they need. And it's also more cost effective. If we look at some of the calculations that have been done, says that for us to get cost effective or cost reflective power from the grid will cost us about 90 naira per kilowatt hour, which is a bit higher than what the grid charges today. And if you look at the off-grid, average of generation of off-grid cost about 150 naira per kilowatt hour. If you're talking about your better pass my neighbor to your solar home systems, it's a variety of costs, but it aggregates to about 150 naira. So we're paying significantly higher than we should be paying for energy in Lagos, and we intend to reduce that.
Okay. You know, all of this is very interesting, but some sort of immediate truths hit you, because we also know that off-grid, especially the solar system, in Nigeria at least, is not really a viable proposition yet. It's expensive. I mean, people are using it, but they can't really say that they're getting the bulk of the 80 to 90% of their needs from solar. That's not possible yet.
Okay, so it isn't possible yet, and I like the fact that you put yet, but it is indeed possible. Today, what we've looked at, we've done the calculations and the projections. If we can aggregate the demand in the off-grid, and we're looking at a solely solar prospect now, if we can standardize all of the solar equipment that we use in Lagos, given the amount of demand that we have, we believe that we can generate solar much cheaper than the grid supply today. Cheaper. I said, and we've gone ahead and done a number.
Scale would kick in.
Oh yes,
if you could standardize it.
That is correct.
If anybody wanted to go into it, they would all be uniform.
That's correct.
Then that would be a lot more efficient.
Oh, it certainly is. And examples abound of areas where this has been done. For example, when Moman imports fuel, imports for the entire sector in Nigeria, it doesn't, Mobil will not import its own petrol, Total will not import its own petrol. If they tried to do that, it would be terribly expensive. So what they do is they aggregate and they import together. And NNPC also does that for petrol, if you will. The Moman typically would do the industrial fuels like diesel. They don't import petrol anymore because of the subsidy system that we have. And that's what we're trying to address here in Lagos. We believe that because people are already paying for power, we shouldn't be looking at subsidizing the power sector. We should really just be looking at aggregating it and ensuring that it works efficiently.
You know, well, thank you very much, because this is quite informative, and the way you're going about it is the way I'm sort of following. I sort of put my questions to one side, because there are all sorts of ways into the market, so to speak. Now, there will be bottlenecks. There will be bottlenecks when you have this kind of a strategy, a plan, and I wonder what you're going to be doing to be addressing those bottlenecks. I'm guessing, for instance, that metering is going to be one of those bottlenecks and those kind of things. Or is that an inaccuracy? Are there no bottlenecks really?
So the way I see it, right, when we talk about metering in the off-grid space, if you buy a generator that you're going to be using by yourself, it comes with a meter. So that cost you've already spent. And I really don't see those bottlenecks, because today we're already paying for it in the sector. If I buy an better pass my neighbor, for example, it comes at a cost, right? And the diesel cost already more than pays for any meter that I would want to achieve or that I would want to deploy if I were getting power from a much cheaper source. So we're already paying for all of these things. And the metering bottleneck is really not a bottleneck per se. It's really just a cost that we can amortize over time. For example, Lagos State government again, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu has caused us to procure 20,000 meters just for some certain vulnerable areas that we've identified and we're going to be using as pilots. Those meters have started to arrive in the country. We have about 10,000 of them already ready to deploy into those areas. We've identified those areas already, and it's given the go-ahead to go and do that because we want to improve power supply and demonstrate that it can be done. When we go to those areas and we install them and also invest in the last mile infrastructure in those areas, working of course with the discos as we have them today, and we can demonstrate that it works, then it makes it easier for us to replicate this across the rest of Lagos. So I don't see it so much as a bottleneck as really an enabler.
I see. Now, you talk about in conversations on this project of the Lagos State government, you talk about the Lagos electricity market. So what is that? Isn't every single resident of Lagos in that electricity market?
That is correct. So let me step back again and take a look at what's going on across the electricity market today. If you look at Lagos alone, in the past 3 years in Lagos alone, we've imported 8,000 megawatts worth of diesel generating capacity. Now that's terribly expensive power, but the market has paid for it. The market is everybody who participates, meaning if I buy a generator today and I pay for it, the market has paid for it. If you compare that to the national grid, where the last addition that was made was the Azura power plant, a 450 megawatt power plant, which has caused quite a bit of a stir in the industry because it was done the way a proper procurement should have been done, with guarantees of payment, meaning whether or not we use it, as long as we have it in the system, we procured it properly, we will pay for it. And the market is has been a bit shaken with the fact of having to pay for 450 megawatts of power, when in Lagos alone, the market has acquired 8,000 megawatts of power without shaking. So that tells me that there's something wrong with the central market as we have it today. And that's why we're saying, let's take them in bits at a time and look at the Lagos market and try and correct that, such that we don't have a problem with procurement of generation infrastructure, or indeed last mile distribution infrastructure as you have it.
As I said, on Wednesday, Governor Sanwo-Olu will be presenting the Lagos State electricity policy. And it has a subheading that's quite interesting, providing universal and reliable electricity access to our citizens.
Yes, sir.
That's the part that's going to make a lot of Lagos residents excited. First of all, universal. And as if that wasn't enough, you now say reliable. And by the way, depending on where you live in Lagos, it does seem that for a while, for more than a few weeks, more than a couple of weeks certainly, the power situation has become a lot more regular. I don't know, is that just a happenstance? Is that a coincidence? Or is that as a result of some of this that is going on and we're beginning to see the offshoots, as it were?
Well, in terms of power reliability and regularity, there are ebbs and flows. So today we might have an issue with a generation company. Tomorrow we might have an issue with a transmission bottleneck, and so those things keep happening. And sometimes it's really just a distribution problem as well, because the system exists and the system is supposed to be integrated, but there are issues. There are bottleneck issues, there are capacity issues, there are infrastructure gaps. There is also the inability, if you will, to invest in infrastructure given the economic or the commercial state of the market, where some people will argue that the tariffs are not cost reflective. Some people will argue that the subsidies are not properly appropriated and they're not being properly applied. Some people will argue that investment is impossible. Then there was also the need for, you'll also hear cases of CBN intervention funds and all of that. And when we talk about universal and reliable access, that is what is normal. If you go around the areas that we like to compare ourselves to, when you go anywhere and you switch on the light, it comes on, it's planned. I remember one day when I walked into a distribution company, M&D sector, and I was looking at their network outside the country, and I saw some red lights in some areas. And I said, oh, what's that? What's that red light there? And they said to me, oh, that's a customer that's on life support. That means we have to ensure that they have power all the time. And the level of data and the level of follow-up that exists in those networks is something that we aspire to have, and it's something we can have, starting from Lagos. Now, the good thing about fixing Lagos is everybody looks at it and can copy it. So fixing Lagos is like fixing Nigeria. And that's a task that we have taken to heart. Mr. Sanwo-Olu has certainly insisted that that's what we must do.
Yeah, well, okay. Because, well, off-grid is quite expensive, as you've said. Abi?
So today it is, because everybody is their own player in the off-grid and we don't enjoy any economies of scale. And what I've said is, if we can harmonize that sector, the off-grid sector, and bring everybody to the same market, then the prices will drop significantly. I'll give you an example, and this is going to be a far example. In your house, for example, if you look at your generator, it's probably oversized. When you turn on your generator, let's assume that you have a 20 kVA generator and your entire demand in your house is about, say, 8 kVA.
Okay.
Then you have 12 kVA that's redundant capacity that you're not using.
But you're paying
if
for.
that 12 kVA, you could put it on the grid and get paid for it, that 12 kVA will probably pay for your generation. You probably would not need to spend any more money. And so we think if we can look at all of the capacity that exists and also harmonize the capacity that we want to bring in, we think the prices will drop significantly.
You know, I've heard of this idea, but I hesitate, you know, often when you talk about, because I've heard about it in the US, and I hesitate to, you know, compare, you know, those two kinds of markets. The idea of when you generate more than you need, you can actually sell back to the government by putting on the grid what you don't need. Now, as I said, I always hesitate, but since you went there, I just thought I'd bounce that off you that we're probably a far way away from that, but I've heard that it can be done, and I must be very clear that it's in the US and I'm not comparing us.
Well, I really don't have any problems comparing us to anybody, because if you look at the US market, you're going to find a lot of Nigerians there. So what's wrong with us here? The difference is really in the regulatory environment that we find ourselves, and we're trying to change that to ensure that people can come into the market in a way that is sustainable and in a way that is affordable. So if we don't look at the market as, oh, it's difficult to achieve this, but we look at the market in a this is what we want to achieve way, we will get there. So it's really about having the right idea and then getting the and putting in the right regulatory environment or the regulatory framework such that people can then start to be innovative.
Okay.
Because if a system forces you to comply in a certain way, then your creative juices are slowed down, if you will. What we want to do is encourage people to start to think, I can do this. We can participate in this market. We can improve electricity supply in Lagos. And we're working with the discos to ensure that they are also part of this. They don't want to supply 900 megawatts. They want to supply 6,000 megawatts. And we're saying, here's how we can work together to ensure that that happens. And we're not leaving any money on the table.
Okay. Well, let me use this opportunity to, you know, tell our viewers that, you know, some of our viewers, there's a live event that we intend to cover. The Chief of Army Staff has an event in Abuja, but the rest of our terrestrial viewers can continue to be watching us. In all sorts of consultations, you know, could we talk about that?
Oh, certainly. Sometime last year, we sent out a consultation paper, right, to have people advise on what they think we could be doing better. For us, it was simple. We want to achieve universal access to electricity in Lagos, and we think the Constitution allows us at Lagos to participate in regulating the sector. And the idea is, if you overregulate a sector, you stifle the sector. And if you under-regulate a sector, you also punish the off-takers in that sector, because this sector lends itself to monopolistic activities, if you will. So we have to find a middle ground, a sort of balance, right, where the regulation allows innovation and also benefits both the suppliers and the users, if you will, of the commodity that is produced in that sector. And so that's what we did, was to invite everyone. We invited all the participants in the sector, both on the on-grid and the off-grid sector, to say, what can we be doing differently? Here's what we're thinking of doing in Lagos. And we received quite a lot of responses from everybody, from consultants to lawyers to distribution companies to transmission company to even the other government agencies that are leading the privatization of the government assets, to say, here's where we agree with you, and here's some things that you should look at doing. And we've taken all of that right into context, and we've come up with a document that Mr. Governor will be presenting on Wednesday, which is the Lagos electricity policy. That policy really just says, here's what Lagos intends to achieve in the short, medium, and long term, and here's how we intend to do it. So on Wednesday, we will receive that document, and everybody will then have the chance to go through it and understand how it is that they can play. One of the major things we're looking at doing is attracting investment into that sector in Lagos, and we've received quite a bit of interest since we started to talk about this.
Okay, because I've heard you say on another media that in terms of capacity, the private sector is really better placed than public sector to do an excellent job of this.
Well, in terms of their requirements for diligence, that's certainly a key area. But more than that, if you look at the Lagos State government budget, it hovers around $2.5 billion. That's the annual budget. If you look at the Lagos State GDP, that's about $150 billion US. The money is out there in the private sector. The investment capacity is out there in the private sector. So if we want to fix power, the state government is not going to be investing in all the infrastructure and metering that is needed. It's only the private sector that can muster the amount of investment capital that we need. And so we're going to be encouraging them to do that. And what we want to do in Lagos is ensure that they find a viable market here. They find willing customers, if you will, a willing market, so to speak, that they can play in, and one that's sustainable and guarantees investment returns for them. Okay,
but you have invested a bit, haven't you, in meter manufacturing or provision?
So we certainly have invested a bit, but even our investment have been to encourage other players. For example, our investment in a transmission and metering factory, I think our invested is limited to 5%. So we're not the ones mobilizing the investment. We're just staying in there so that they can feel comfortable that the state government is a partner of theirs. So what we have are really nominal investments rather than the major investments, if you will. So
going back to this matter of universal electricity in the first instance, and then regular. One of the projects that Lagos has been working on that's connected with electricity is the concept of, or the program Light Up Lagos.
Yes.
So I imagine all of these, all of them become an integrated whole, right?
So Light Up Lagos is an integrated program. Light Up Lagos means Lagos is lit up, meaning if you go into your house and you turn on the switch, the light comes on, that's Light Up Lagos. If you go out in public and the street lights are on, that's Light Up Lagos.
Okay.
So Light Up Lagos is an integrated program. It's not one program. Street lighting is a part of it. Improvement in distribution is a part of it. Improvement in transmission is a part of it. Availability of generation is a part of it. So what we're trying to do is ensure that Lagos is lit up, and there's so many facets of that. And a big part of that, and I should actually mention this, is also innovation. We're also trying to promote innovation. Last year, for example, we had a meter hackathon. When we were told that a major problem was the availability of meters that were affordable, we said, okay, let's see if we can design a made in Nigeria meter that's also affordable. And so we invited, we published, invited people to come in and submit their designs. We shortlisted, invited them to come and demonstrate their prototype. We selected a winner. We've been working with that winner on commercializing, coming up with a ready for market product, and then trying to work with manufacturers to produce their prototype and then mass manufacture it. So we're working with a lot of people to try and encourage this young people. Some of them have also come up with a design for metering systems that can integrate to the meters that they're manufacturing, such that we don't have to depend on imports for everything that we do. So and this is only a small part of it. If we can encourage people to produce meters in Nigeria, to design and produce them and manufacture them in Nigeria, then perhaps we can look at doing other areas of the electricity sector. We can look at finding innovative ways of making sure that they're able to be provided from Nigeria. And as the economy grows in Lagos, it benefits the whole of Nigeria.
Indeed, I can imagine, and the electricity will certainly give it a boost, because there's so many artisans, so many small businesses, one-man businesses that really depend on electricity. And because they can't depend on electricity, we know that they've had to go to the alternative source, which you've also referred to as something that we ourselves are providing, for ourselves, and it's not the most cost-effective way to go. But until now, there was no option. Now, you started at the beginning by saying that this Lagos electricity policy, there are short, medium, and long-term goals. The matter of reliability, you just took the wind out of my sail a bit by saying that, well, that matter where some people have seen a more regular supply than before, that's a seasonal thing. It could be fluctuating. It doesn't necessarily have very much to do with this whole project.
Correct.
But so what would be the short term? We're talking about, is it fair to still be looking for some goal achievements this year anymore?
Well, what we will do this year is publish the policy. What we hope that does is that it encourages investment in the sector. At least let's bring people in that want to do things in the sector. And there's something that we started to call one community at a time. So like I mentioned, the pilot that Mr. Governor has approved that we do is to go into communities and say, let's identify one community. Let's turn it into, if you will, a lighthouse, such that when people come in, they see it. It's like a beacon of hope that this community is working. Can we expand it to other communities and let communities also come in and take a stake in improvement in their infrastructure, and let the investors also look at it and say, okay, let's look at this area and see how we can participate in it, because it's now open for participation. And then let's work with the distribution companies to say, now that we've achieved this, how can we then expand it across the rest of Lagos? So it's not going to be one massive investment that's going to fix the problem. It's going to be a series of small, medium, and large size investments that will ensure that we get to where we want to, which is universal access to electricity. So if you're asking about targets, we have long-term targets that you will see when we do publish them, that says by a certain time we expect us to have had universal access to everybody in Lagos. Universal access means everybody that wants electricity has it.
Has it, yeah. Now the question of the pilots,
yes,
that you said the governor is very excited about that. Said, let's see what we can do about that. Explain those pilots a bit more to me. Are we talking about rural areas that, how would that work? What are the designation of these areas?
So we were deliberate about trying to identify which pilot areas we wanted. We wanted some densely populated communities, because as you know, Lagos is a densely populated area. Lagos is not considered to be rural. Lagos is considered to be 95% urban and about 5% peri-urban, and maybe 1% rural. So there's not a lot of rural in Lagos.
Okay.
And so these solutions lend themselves to Lagos. And so we couldn't look for an urban area in Lagos and use a rural area in Lagos and use as a pilot, because it's then difficult to replicate that. So we're looking for a typical Lagos area, which would be a highly densely populated area that is not Victoria Island. Mm-hmm. It's an area where it would be appreciated that there's a government intervention, and we would be able to replicate it, because if we pick one of the, how should I say, lower income areas, and it works in those areas, then it's easier to look at a middle income area and indeed a high income area and say, why wouldn't it work here? The idea is not to charge as much as we can for electricity, but to ensure that we're able to give electricity at a reasonable cost.
And, well, reasonable is going to be a relative term.
So let me say this when we talk about that. People are paying for electricity anyway. Mm-hmm. I'll give an example. The solar home systems finds a market in the really rural areas. And some of them pay as much as 200 naira per kilowatt hour for electricity, which is about 5 times what the cost of the grid electricity price is. Now, they're paying for it. The difference is where you might have 5 air conditions in your house, they probably only have a light bulb and a fan. So affordability is not the problem. They're already paying for the electricity today. So when people talk about affordability, I think they're playing to the gallery. They're not really addressing the issues that the people are facing, which is we want electricity. They're already paying for it today, and they're paying a higher price than they should be paying.
And all of this new policy, this Lagos State electricity policy, is going to be addressing all of those in a positive way.
That is correct.
To bring down the cost of electricity, to the universal access.
Oh, yes.
You know, if you wanted to call in, let me give you a different number apart from the one that you usually use. You ready? 0902 416 3440. I'll just say it again. 0902 416 3440. And we are chatting with Engineer Olalere Odusote, Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources. We're not touching the mineral resources part today. His hands are full with the energy aspect of the entire thing. And if you're just joining us now, we had established at the top that come Wednesday, just day after tomorrow, the governor will indeed be unveiling it, by 12 noon at Eco Hotel, I believe.
That is correct. But given that we're in a COVID environment, we will also be streaming, and we will be sharing the details of the URLs for the streaming. You can follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, and there will also be a Zoom link that will be published.
And if also a Zoom link. We're typical of Lagos, shall we say, center of excellence. There are all ways that you can possibly connect to it. And this must be, I would imagine this is something very close to the governor's heart, because
yes, one of the big issues that we addressed at the inception of this government was how to deal with the issue of power supply, because a lot of Lagosians had complained. Lagosians had two primary complaints. One is traffic, which, as you can see, we're dealing with, and the second one was power supply, which today is largely regulated by the federal government. So our interventions have so far been limited, but now we expect to expand it significantly for the benefit of Lagosians. You know,
the complication with Lagos, because when you began at the beginning and said, let me take you back a bit, and you went back to even Enron, the whole matter, Lagos actually, but for some technicalities, Lagos is able to distribute, shall we say, is it generate or distribute by itself? But because of this matter about the exclusive legislative list and things like that, there were some sort of, problems at the time.
Well, let me correct that. Electricity is not on the exclusive legislative list. Electricity is on the concurrent legislative list, which means Lagos can regulate generation, transmission, and distribution within Lagos. Any state can, really. But at the time the Power Sector Reform Act was passed, no state was in a position to regulate electricity matters within its borders. That has changed. We'd have many years of working with in the electricity space, and Lagos State is ready to take up its responsibility for regulating within that space, working, of course, with the federal government and the other agencies.
So Lagos State is, well, in a better place now than it used to be in that.
Oh yes, we have a much better understanding.
Is it a matter of, well, the party in the state is now the party at the center?
Oh no, it has nothing to do with that. When the restructuring was going on at the federal level, the only agencies that were involved in the power sector at that time were federal agencies. So all of the expertise was in the federal government. So there was only one NEPA. There was only one PHCN. They were federal government agencies. There was only one regulator at the time it was created. It was a federal government regulator. So the states were not prepared, right? And the states were ill-equipped, if you will, to regulate in that sector. So it was really all of the expertise resided in the federal government. But since then, a lot has changed. We have the local distribution companies that exist. We've got all sorts of Nigerians in the diaspora who have come back to come and take a look at the sector to say this is what we should be doing differently. And certainly in Lagos State, we simply have more than enough capacity to regulate at this point.
With that kind of a model, is it possible for us to also help the whole national effort by putting excess capacity, so to speak, if you look at it like that, back on the grid for other people?
Well, one step at a time. We will get to a point of universal access in Lagos, and if we have excess capacity, we will be able to work with the rest of the country to ensure that they get there. My expectation, though, is that given that Lagos is Lagos, once Lagos starts to do something differently, everybody else will try and do as much as we're doing, perhaps even more. But we're going to do what we need to do to ensure that Lagosians get regular supply of electricity. And then everybody else
and
can
sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later.
I know it's probably not fair to try and pin you down to when we can begin to, look at the actually receiving this policy, but I would guess that it's going to be, as I said, as you said, sooner rather than later. Are we looking at the first half, up to the first half of next year?
To do what? For the policy to be published?
No. That's going to be published on Wednesday.
Oh, yes.
For there to be an improvement in the electricity situation.
So
what would be the parameters
so
for
there's
the,
a timeline
for
there's a timeline for investment.
Okay.
Right. So it will take.
Okay. And any improvement will follow investment.
That's correct.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is to create an environment that encourages investment in the sector. And as we start to see that investment, we'll start to see the improvement in the sector.
Well, quite frankly, there will be some things that the governor will be releasing, as it were, come Wednesday. But for now, I guess, we've got all that we, at least to sort of herald the governor's outing on Wednesday. We know a bit more about it now, and we know that better days are ahead for
for sure,
for residents, citizens of Lagos. Talking about 26 odd million?
26 million Lagosians. I mean, people vote with their feet. If you want to see where things are working, just go and stand at the border. If everybody's coming in, and from the last check we did, we received 800,000 new immigrants into Lagos on an annual basis. That's the highest immigration rate in the world. There's nowhere else that does that. I mean, relative to the rest of the country, it's clear to everybody that the Lagos state government is doing something right. And we hope to extend that. We hope to justify their confidence in us by ensuring that we fix the electricity sector we fix the electricity sector.
Well, all I can say is kudos and thanks to you, Engineer Olalere Odusote, Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources in Lagos State. It does look like Lagos has, that is the citizens, have a lot to look forward to under the administration of Governor Sanwo-Olu.
Certainly under the administration of Mr. Sanwo-Olu, there's a lot to look forward to, and especially in the electricity space and certainly in every other space.
Well, okay, you threw in every other space because I'd like to have the benefit of having you and then talk about the mineral resources that's also under your portfolio. I imagine that would be largely bitumen because that's what people think of that.
For the most part in Lagos, yes, we have some deposits of bitumen which we haven't fully started to exploit, but for the most part what we deal with here is sand, right? And what we try and do is ensure that the exploitation of sand is not deleterious to the environment, that we manage it in a way that Lagosians can benefit from it, and it also does not create unsightly environmental disasters. So it's a balance that we have to manage, because if you look at Lagos is by the coast. Lagos has a tenuous ecological balance, if you will, given that some parts of Lagos are 2 meters below sea level, and as we start to talk about the rise in the oceans with global warming, Lagos is one of the states that is said to be under threat. But as Lagos, we're not sitting down there. We have our waterfront ministry that's looking closely at that to ensure that we don't have any disasters. The seaward in Lagos, the one that's occasioned by the Eco-Atlantic, is one of the lines of defense that we've put in place, and a lot of people don't understand what that is, but it's if you look at the annual flooding that used to occur on Barbage, it's not happening anymore. And that's just done by good management of resources. We have to find a way to continue to do that on a daily basis for the protection of Lagos. A lot of times what we do is silent, but as long as there are no disasters, then you know that we're doing our job.
It's interesting you just said that, but yes, there are deposits of bitumen which haven't been fully exploited, but that principle among the resources, mineral resources, would be sand. Not many people would have known that. Of course, those in the know will know. But so sand, this is sand for what? For building purposes, for construction purposes.
Sand for construction.
Sand for construction. Is sand a wasting asset?
Please explain that.
ṣé ohun tó lè tán ni?
So, a standard wasting asset. So let me put it this way. There's a finite space that we have available in Lagos. What we've done in certain areas to extend that space in an ecologically sustainable way. So if you look at the lagoon, there have been some attempts at expanding the land space that's available around that area to ensure that Lagosians have space to expand into. It's also for us an economical exercise, because if people are able to stay in Lagos, then it's beneficial for Lagos. That means industries are able to stay in Lagos, which is their home anyway. And that means that there's a future, a thriving future for Lagos. And we intend to continue to exploit that as much as possible without also, again, like I say, being damaging to the environment, and ensure that we're able to continue to accommodate the needs of Lagosians. We're also working, obviously, with the other neighboring states to ensure that Lagos also doesn't then get overcrowded. For example, we have the rail lines that go to Ogun State. We have, Lagos is a mega city. If you look at the mega city idea that was propounded on Obasanjo, it wasn't just Lagos, it included large areas of Ogun State as well. And so we're working with Ogun State to ensure that we're able to use land in Ogun State where we need to. We've got a lot of farmland that we've acquired in that area as well to ensure that we're able to feed Lagosians. But I'll let my colleagues in those areas also speak more to it. But the idea is Lagos is not alone. Lagos does not walk alone. Lagos works in partnership. We believe in partnerships both with external countries and also other states around ourselves.
So I caught this, especially when you said that, if you're going to be expanding that resource, sand, there has to be an ecological balance.
Oh, yes.
Because you can mess things up if you over dredge or whatever. We've heard of that in different parts of the world where there are now consequences that you now have to come and start addressing. But Lagos is probably, proceeding with ecological knowledge and...
Oh, certainly, and under the governor, everything that we do has to be sustainable. If you look at it, we've elevated SDG to a cabinet level position. We have an SA, Special Advisor to the Governor on Sustainable Development Goals. So what we do always has sustainability at the end of it. We have a digital, we have a digital platform where we track sustainability on all our activities. So it's not something that we take for granted, certainly not in Lagos.
Well, thanks again, Engineer Olalere Odusote. Lagos State Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources will wait for day after tomorrow when Mr. Governor shall be indeed launching, publishing that report, the report of the Lagos State electricity policy. Thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. It was my pleasure, and I look forward to working with everyone to ensure a better Lagos.
Indeed. Thank you very much. So that's our program. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folani. Bye-bye for now.